Venezuela is on the brink. US warships are patrolling the Caribbean, tensions are rising by the day, and Nicolás Maduro has ordered millions of militia fighters to mobilize. But here's the million-dollar question. What if those militias, the very backbone of his control, turn against him when the conflict escalates? Could this be the breaking point that topples the Venezuelan regime? To understand just how powerful this question is, we need to unpack what militias in Venezuela actually are. Venezuela's Bolivarian militia is not just a ragtag group of volunteers, it's a formal branch of the armed forces integrated under the Ministry of Defense. In addition, there are colectivos, which are irregular pro-government groups operating in neighborhoods, often acting as the government's eyes, ears, and sometimes fists on the ground. These groups maintain order, break up protests, and ensure loyalty to the regime. The scale is massive. As of mid-2025, Maduro claims more than 4.5 million militia members are organized across the country. Their presence stretches from the capital Caracas to the smallest rural communities. They act as a critical layer of control, a human shield against potential uprisings and a deterrent against any military intervention. But these militias are not a single unified force. Some are deeply ideological, driven by loyalty to the late Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian revolution. Others are motivated by practical rewards, food packages, pay, protection, or even power over their local neighborhoods. This diversity is key when analyzing whether they might defect in a crisis. Right now, loyalty seems unshaken. High-ranking military figures like Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez have repeatedly declared their absolute loyalty to Maduro. State TV shows endless footage of militia parades, women and men in fatigues saluting the president, chanting pro-government slogans. There's also a robust patronage network that keeps militias dependent on the regime. Members often receive food boxes through the CLAP program, fuel vouchers, or guaranteed jobs. These benefits are critical in a country where the economic crisis has made basic survival a daily challenge. And let's not forget the element of fear. Maduro's intelligence services, SEBIN and DGCIM, monitor dissent closely. Any sign of betrayal is met with harsh punishment, including imprisonment or disappearance. This creates an atmosphere where loyalty is not just encouraged, it is enforced. Yet there are cracks in the facade. Venezuela's economy remains in freefall, with hyperinflation eroding the value of stipends and government support. If the state can't provide for its militia fighters, loyalty may waver. Another potential stressor is the human cost of conflict. If militias are ordered to engage directly with a foreign military force, say in the event of more US strikes, casualties could rise. Will poorly equipped, often poorly trained militias stay committed if they start losing members in significant numbers? Local grievances could also trigger rebellion. Colectivos are closely tied to the communities they control. If these neighborhoods rise up, militias might refuse to fire on neighbors, friends, even family members. There are historical precedents where security forces have refused to repress protests in Latin America when the cost of doing so was too high. Finally, there's the possibility of external offers. Opposition leaders and foreign actors could attempt to lure militias with promises of amnesty, future political participation, or money, all designed to encourage defection. Let's explore a few scenarios where militias might abandon Maduro. Scenario 1, localized refusal to repress. In the event of mass protests, some colectivos could quietly disobey orders, allowing demonstrations to grow. Even small-scale refusals can snowball, sending a message to others that loyalty is no longer absolute. Scenario 2, factions split off. Some militia commanders, sensing that Maduro's grip is weakening, could defect and take their fighters with them. If this happens in multiple regions, it would be a serious blow to the regime's power projection. Scenario 3, mass defection triggered by military elite. If the top brass of the Venezuelan armed forces were to turn on Maduro, as has been rumored during past crises, militias might follow, both out of fear of being left exposed and out of a pragmatic desire to survive in the new order. These scenarios are not mere speculation. Analysts have warned for years that the stability of Venezuela depends on the security forces, both formal and informal. Once loyalty cracks, collapse can happen very quickly. The risk of militias turning on Maduro is not just about his personal power, it's about the stability of the entire Venezuelan state. A sudden militia defection could lead to violent confrontations as loyalist and breakaway factions fight for control. This could spiral into a full-scale civil conflict with devastating consequences for civilians already suffering from economic hardship. There's also the risk of criminality rising. Many colectivos are already involved in illicit activities, smuggling, extortion, protection rackets. If they break free of central control, they could transform into purely criminal groups, plunging neighborhoods into chaos. From a geopolitical perspective, such instability would alarm Venezuela's allies, like Russia, China, and Cuba, who have vested interests in keeping Maduro in power. It could also embolden the US and its allies to push for regime change, believing that Maduro is finally vulnerable. While defections make for dramatic headlines, there are solid reasons why militias might stand by Maduro even under pressure. The regime has spent years carefully embedding Chavista ideology into the militias. For many members, serving is not just about money, it's about identity. They see themselves as defenders of Venezuela against imperialism, particularly US aggression. That narrative becomes even stronger when there is a real external threat, like the current naval presence in the Caribbean. Fear also keeps many in line. Members know that betrayal is punished severely, and there may be no safe path if they defect. Opposition forces are fragmented, and many militia members doubt they would be welcomed in a post-Maduro Venezuela without retribution. Another factor is material dependency. Even in crisis, Maduro has found ways to provide benefits to his base. Food aid, subsidized fuel, and access to scarce goods are powerful incentives. Losing these could mean losing the ability to survive. So, could Venezuelan militias turn on Maduro if the conflict escalates? The answer is complicated. There are scenarios, economic collapse, mass casualties, shifting military allegiances that could push militias to defect. But as of now, the weight of evidence suggests that Maduro still commands their loyalty through a mix of ideology, coercion, and patronage. That doesn't mean his position is unassailable. The situation is dynamic, and history shows that authoritarian regimes can fall suddenly when loyalty networks unravel. If militias ever perceive that Maduro cannot protect them or guarantee their future, they may act to save themselves. And when they do, it could trigger the endgame for his government. For now, the world is watching. Every declaration of loyalty, every militia parade, and every sign of dissent will be scrutinized as a potential signal of what's to come. Venezuela is standing on a knife's edge, and whether the militias stay loyal or turn away could determine the country's future. Venezuela's political history offers powerful lessons about what happens when loyalty fractures inside armed structures. In 2002, a faction of the Venezuelan armed forces briefly turned against then-President Hugo Chavez, leading to a short-lived coup. Chavez returned to power within 48 hours because the lower ranks and street mobilization still supported him. That episode taught the regime an enduring lesson: control the street-level armed base, not just the generals. Maduro has built on that lesson. While top generals get lucrative contracts and control over state industries, the colectivos and Bolivarian militia have been empowered to act as a grassroots defense force. They're armed, trained, and heavily politicized. This makes them appear loyal, but it also means they have the capability to act independently if they lose faith in him. In Latin America more broadly, history shows that once lower-rank armed groups turn against leaders, regimes can crumble quickly. In Nicaragua, 1979, Somoza's National Guard began defecting when US support wavered, accelerating his downfall. In Libya, 2011, local militias initially loyal to Gaddafi flipped once NATO strikes signaled he might lose, and they became decisive in his overthrow. These parallels matter because they show how momentum, not ideology, often drives defection. Once militias sense the regime's collapse is inevitable, survival instincts can override years of loyalty. While the regime portrays the militia as a single bloc, it's actually fragmented into thousands of small local cells with wildly different interests. Some are fiercely ideological, others are pragmatic or even purely criminal. Ideological collectives. Many still champion Chavismo as a revolutionary cause. They are less likely to defect unless they feel Maduro has betrayed Chavez's legacy. Criminalized cells. In border states like Táchira, Zulia, and Apure, some militias overlap with smuggling networks and illegal mining. These groups care more about protecting profits than defending Maduro. If conflict disrupts their income streams, they may switch sides or go rogue. Urban colectivos. In cities like Caracas and Maracaibo, these groups enforce political loyalty through intimidation, but their legitimacy depends on their neighborhoods tolerating them. If urban unrest spikes, these groups could fracture under local pressure. State-sponsored loyalists. Some militia leaders have personal ties to top regime officials and rely on direct government contracts. They are likely to stay with Maduro unless the entire state structure collapses. This patchwork structure creates an inherent vulnerability to chain reactions. If a few colectivos defect, especially prominent ones in Caracas, others may follow to avoid being isolated when the balance shifts. External actors play a huge role in shaping whether militias might defect. The United States has intensified its pressure campaign, labeling Venezuelan gangs like Tren de Aragua as narco-terrorist organizations and launching strikes on alleged drug boats. While Washington insists these attacks target traffickers, Maduro portrays them as imperial aggression. This narrative currently unifies the militias behind him. However, if US pressure escalates into targeted sanctions on militia leaders, it could backfire on Maduro. Many militia commanders rely on smuggling and covert finance networks. If those lifelines are cut off and their personal wealth is threatened, loyalty could erode quickly. Cuba, Russia, and China have also shaped militia loyalty. Cuba has provided training and political indoctrination. Russia has sold arms and offered military advisors. China provides technology and surveillance systems. If any of these allies signal reduced support, or if US diplomacy pries them away, militias may interpret it as Maduro losing international backing, a key psychological pillar of his power. Regional neighbors like Colombia and Brazil are watching closely. A civil conflict in Venezuela could spill across borders through refugee flows, arms trafficking, and cross-border militia movements. Quiet back-channel talks are reportedly underway between Colombia's government and parts of the Venezuelan opposition to prepare for a potential collapse scenario. If militias sense they might get regional guarantees for their safety, that could make defection more attractive. Analysts have identified a set of warning signs that could reveal if militias are starting to turn: refusal to suppress protests. If collectivos stand down or disappear during large demonstrations, it may show declining loyalty. Public dissent from local commanders. Any militia leader openly criticizing Maduro or the government could embolden others. Sudden shifts in propaganda. Tone. A sharp decrease in state-run coverage of militia activities might indicate concern about loyalty. Rise in infighting or turf wars. Violence between collectivos could mean the command structure is fraying. Mass desertions or relocations. If significant numbers leave their posts or relocate families away from conflict zones, it could signal fear of collapse. Monitoring these subtle signals will be crucial for journalists, intelligence services, and human rights groups trying to gauge Venezuela's trajectory. If militias do start turning, the collapse could move fast. A possible chain reaction might look like this: localized refusals. A handful of collectivos in Caracas refuse to repress protests. Videos of this go viral, inspiring others. Military fence-sitting. Mid-ranking army officers hesitate to intervene, fearing their troops will refuse to fight civilians. Mass protests escalate. Sensing weakness, opposition groups call mass marches. Some militias join or protect protesters. Fragmentation of the security forces. Army units split, with loyalists defending government buildings while others stand down. Elite negotiations begin. Foreign diplomats broker talks. Defecting militia leaders demand amnesty and positions in a transitional council. Regime implodes. Maduro loses Caracas. Loyalist militias retreat to strongholds or flee. A chaotic power vacuum follows. While this is hypothetical, it mirrors the pattern seen in other authoritarian collapses: fast-moving, chaotic, and driven by sudden shifts in perceived loyalty. For ordinary Venezuelans, the stakes could not be higher. Many live in communities directly controlled by collectivos. If militias stay loyal, they could be used to crush dissent even more violently than the regular armed forces. But if they break away, the country could descend into lawlessness, as heavily armed groups carve up territory. The humanitarian impact could be catastrophic: more mass displacement, shortages of food and medicine, and possible revenge killings or score settling. Civil society groups are warning that any collapse must be managed through international mediation to avoid Somalia-like conditions. Whether Venezuelan militias turn on Maduro is not just a question of military loyalty. It's about whether the system of fear, patronage, and ideology that has sustained Venezuela's regime for decades can survive direct confrontation. Right now, Maduro still holds the advantage. His militias are large, organized, and deeply tied to the regime's survival. But the pressure is building. If conflict with the US escalates and the regime shows signs of faltering, the survival instincts of those same militias could ignite the very rebellion Maduro fears most. In the end, Venezuela's future may hinge not on foreign armies or opposition politicians, but on the choice of millions of armed men and women who must decide whether Nicolás Maduro is still worth fighting for, or whether his time has run out.